Welcome back to my channel. Today we will learn about the issue that has been stirring the hearts of everyone in the ABC General Hospital community. The focus of our attention is the harrowing situation that has befallen Michael and its subsequent repercussions for those who love him. Michael, who was severely injured in an explosion at Sonny's home, was in dire need of specialized medical care. His burns were extensive and potentially life-threatening, and Carly, his devoted mother, found herself desperate to find a way to save her son's life. In the midst of this chaos, Brennan stepped in. Motivated by his deep affection for Carly, Brennan took immediate action to arrange everything necessary for Michael's treatment, searching the globe for a specialized burn clinic that could offer the kind of intensive care Michael required. After extensive inquiries, Brennan discovered that there was a renowned burn treatment facility in Germany staffed by leading experts in burn care and reconstruction. With a focus on giving Michael the best chance of survival, Brennan used his resources to secure Michael a spot in this clinic as quickly as possible. He also arranged a private plane so that Michael could be transported in a medically equipped environment, hoping that the swift and dedicated care would grant Michael the greatest chance of recovery. Carly, who could barely contain her anxiety for her son's well-being, was overwhelmed by Brennan's kindness. She had been grappling with terror since the explosion, watching Michael suffer from horrifying burns and receiving only temporary relief from the local medical staff who did their best but warned Carly that Michael needed more specialized attention. The complicated nature of Michael's injuries demanded not just professional expertise but also specialized equipment, and the local facilities, despite doing everything they could, were not equipped for the kind of long-term burn rehabilitation Michael would need. When Brennan offered to handle the logistics, from booking the private jet to speaking directly with the German clinic, Carly felt a deep sense of gratitude. Although she had known of Brennan's feelings for her, she had never imagined he would go to such lengths to help her son. She was touched, and she allowed hope to bloom in her heart for Michael's recovery, buoyed by Brennan's show of support and devotion. As Michael was readied for his flight, the entire family clung to the possibility that this clinic in Germany would be his salvation. The staff in Port Charles worked diligently to stabilize him, ensuring that he would be able to endure the trip. Carly stood by Michael's side, whispering words of encouragement while grasping his hand gently, telling him she loved him. She reminded him of all the people back home who were praying for him, of all the memories they had shared, and of the future they would still have together once he pulled through. Meanwhile, Brennan hovered close, making sure every last detail was taken care of, that the plane was properly outfitted with medical personnel, that the flight path was cleared for rapid departure, and that the German specialists were on standby to receive Michael as soon as the plane landed. He watched the medical team carefully load Michael onto a stretcher and transfer him onto the aircraft. Carly looked on with tearful eyes, praying that this risky journey would save her son's life rather than make it more precarious. But fate dealt a devastating blow that night. Soon after takeoff, Brennan received a phone call that would change everything. The private jet, carrying Michael and the medical team, had exploded mid-flight under mysterious circumstances. There were no apparent warnings, no indications of mechanical failure, and no distress signals. One moment, the plane was a beacon of hope headed toward a future filled with potential recovery. The next moment, it was gone. The call informed Brennan that there were no survivors. Every soul on board had perished, including the medical personnel who had committed themselves to saving Michael's life. Brennan was left in a state of profound shock, his mind blank as he tried to absorb the unthinkable news. He felt his legs go weak as he realized the enormity of the tragedy he would have to relay to Carly, who just moments ago was clinging to optimism. With a heavy heart, Brennan made his way to Carly and delivered the news that brought her entire world crashing down. Carly's initial reaction was disbelief. She stared blankly, her heart beating painfully in her chest, as if refusing to acknowledge the words Brennan was saying. The idea that Michael, her beloved son, her pride and joy, the one for whom she had done everything in her power to help, could be gone was incomprehensible. Tears filled her eyes, and she began to tremble. The agony of losing Michael in such a catastrophic, unexpected manner was beyond anything she could have imagined. The shock of the explosion itself was devastating enough, but the knowledge that Michael had boarded that flight filled her with a grief so profound that she could hardly breathe. She collapsed into sobs, her cries echoing in the room, as Brennan watched helplessly. In the aftermath of learning of Michael's death, Carly's sorrow was quickly followed by anger and desperation. She turned her grief into blame, directing it at Brennan, the man who had organized the flight. In her anguish, she demanded to know why Brennan had insisted on putting Michael on that plane, why he had believed this was the best solution, and whether he had checked every safety protocol. Brennan, for his part, was crushed by guilt. Though he had acted with the purest intentions, believing that the German clinic offered Michael his only real chance at survival, he felt personally responsible for the tragedy. Carly could not forgive him in that moment. The pain was too immediate, and the memory of Michael boarding the doomed flight was too raw. Her heartbreak manifested in harsh words, uttered through tears and sobs, accusing Brennan of having taken Michael away from her forever. Despite his own heartbreak, Brennan made a solemn vow to Carly. He promised he would uncover the reason behind the plane's explosion. He vowed that he would not rest until he found answers, that he would delve into every detail of the flight plan, every inspection record, every piece of debris, until he could piece together the cause of the tragedy. He asserted that he would pursue justice for Michael, refusing to let such a seemingly senseless catastrophe remain unexplained. Carly, however, was beyond the point of caring about investigations or official inquiries. In her mind, her son was gone, and no amount of answers or revelations about mechanical failure or sabotage could bring him back. All she knew was that her child was dead, and she felt as though her entire world had been shattered. Plans for Michael's funeral began almost immediately, though Carly found it nearly impossible to function. She was in a state of deep mourning, fluctuating between long spells of numbness and sudden floods of tears. The shock among the rest of Port Charles was palpable. Many people had known Michael as a kind and caring man with a good heart, someone who always looked out for friends and family alike. As preparations for the funeral moved forward, the entire community seemed enveloped in a somber cloud, a tangible grief that weighed upon them. They spoke in hushed tones about the tragedy, about how unfair it was that someone like Michael had been taken so suddenly, and about how Carly might ever recover from such a crushing loss. On the day of Michael's funeral, a melancholy silence hung over the service. The church was filled with mourners dressed in black, their faces drawn and tear-stained. Flowers adorned the entrance, wreaths donated by loved ones. People offered condolences to Carly, but she could barely utter any response. She stood near the casket, gazing upon it with an expression of pure sorrow, remembering Michael as a child in her arms, remembering his laughter, his triumphs, his struggles, and how she had felt a fierce pride every time she looked at him. She could almost convince herself that at any moment he would open his eyes and assure her everything was all right. The finality of his passing was a weight she could not bear, and it felt as though a piece of her had died as well. In attendance at the funeral were many of Michael's close friends and family, including Willow, who wrestled with her own anguish. Willow had fought bitterly with Michael over custody issues regarding their child. In the weeks before his accident, they had clashed repeatedly, each determined to assert their parental rights. Now, Willow stood among the mourners, plagued by guilt and regret. She remembered all the heated arguments, all the moments she had felt anger toward Michael, and she wondered if she had wasted precious time that could have been spent more kindly, more lovingly. Now that Michael was gone, the weight of those conflicts pressed down on her heart. She reflected on how ephemeral life could be, how quickly tragedy could strike and steal away the people we love. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she realized she would never have the chance to make amends, never have the opportunity to share a final moment of genuine peace and understanding with Michael. She could only stand by his casket and mourn a future that would never be. In contrast to the heartbreak and tension echoing throughout the room, Jason carried himself with a stoic resolve. He was devastated, too, but he did his best to remain calm and focused, just as Michael had asked him to be. Before Michael's death, Jason had promised that if anything ever happened to Michael, he would look after Sasha and the baby she was carrying. It was a promise made out of love and loyalty, emblematic of the bond Jason and Michael had forged over many years. Now, in the aftermath of the tragedy, Jason was determined to keep his word. Sasha, cradling the life growing inside her, was overcome by sorrow. She had believed that Michael would survive, that he would meet their child, that they would become a family. Now, standing at his funeral, she could barely process the shock of the entire ordeal. She feared for her future and the future of her unborn child, wondering how she would possibly manage without Michael's partnership and support. Jason, observing Sasha's heartbreak and knowing the enormity of her loss, stepped in to offer whatever help he could provide. He assured her that he would not only be there financially and emotionally, but that he would do whatever it took to provide a stable environment for her and the child. Despite his controlled demeanor, Jason was mourning in his own quiet way. Michael had been like a younger brother to him, someone he respected and admired for his sense of morality and unwavering determination to protect the people he loved. Now, Jason felt the responsibility to ensure that Michael's legacy would live on, particularly through the well-being of Sasha and the unborn child. In the weeks that followed, the question arose among several in Port Charles: would Jason marry Sasha? Some believed it was the most logical step, a way for Jason to provide a proper family setting and the emotional support Sasha would desperately need once the baby arrived. Others wondered if it was something that might complicate Jason's already precarious position in Port Charles. Rumors circulated about the possibility, with some individuals insisting that Jason's desire to protect Michael's child outweighed any misgivings he might have about marriage. Whether or not Jason and Sasha truly loved one another, the well-being of the baby was paramount in Jason's mind, and he was prepared to sacrifice his own comfort to honor Michael's last request. As days turned into weeks, the shock of Michael's plane explosion continued to reverberate throughout Port Charles. Carly vacillated between burning fury at Brennan for having organized the trip and a deep loneliness that threatened to consume her. She remembered the hopeful moments before that flight, when she had believed that sending Michael to the German clinic would be the first step on his path to recovery. She replayed those memories in her mind, torturing herself with the thought that, if she had decided otherwise, perhaps Michael would still be alive. At the same time, she recognized that Brennan's intentions were good. Despite her anger and her accusations, deep down she knew he had done it for Michael's benefit, spurred by his love for her and his desire to show her he would go to any lengths to save her son. That knowledge did little to soothe the rawness of her grief or remove the sense of betrayal that plagued her, though she could not bring herself to wholly condemn him either. Brennan, for his part, could not rest. Determined to fulfill his promise to Carly, he began investigating every aspect of the ill-fated flight. He reached out to aviation experts, pored over maintenance logs, and demanded cooperation from authorities in Europe who were tasked with examining the wreckage. The tragedy, which had left so many dead, weighed on his conscience, driving him to question if there had been some hidden flaw or, worse yet, a deliberate act of sabotage. He felt a moral obligation not only to Michael but to himself and to Carly to provide answers for what had happened. Each day brought new developments, new leads, and new theories, but the puzzle remained agonizingly incomplete. He felt this burden daily, acutely aware that no matter what he discovered, it could not bring Michael back, nor could it fully mend the rift with Carly. Yet, he pressed on, seeking closure for both of them, clinging to the slight hope that his actions would in some way honor Michael's memory. Meanwhile, Willow continued to struggle with her remorse. She had loved Michael in her own complicated way and had fought for custody of their child because she believed it was the best path forward. Yet now, in the face of his death, every squabble and every heated exchange replayed in her memory. She could not change the past, but she desperately wished she had parted on better terms with Michael. Her regret was a daily companion, causing her to question her own motivations and fueling a burning desire to find a way to pay tribute to the man she had fought against but never stopped caring about. The funeral had sparked something within her, an ache that refused to subside and pushed her to re-evaluate what mattered most in life. She wanted to be certain that his memory was respected, though the swirling guilt within her made it difficult to find peace. Each day, she woke up hoping for some sign, some dream in which she could talk to him one last time, to say she was sorry, to tell him that in spite of their differences, she admired him as a person and respected his devotion to his loved ones. Sasha, carrying Michael's child, had her own storms to weather. Amid her sorrow, she also bore the daily physical challenges and emotional ups and downs of pregnancy. She felt the baby move within her, and with every flutter, she thought of Michael, wanting him to share in these moments. At times, the grief was so deep that she felt numb, barely able to function enough to keep her prenatal appointments. In those moments, Jason's silent strength became her pillar of support. He arrived with her at the hospital, helping her talk to doctors, ensuring that all the right medical decisions were being made. She leaned on him, sometimes feeling guilty about it, because she knew he was grieving too. Yet, there was a deep sense of relief in knowing that she did not have to face the future alone. Jason's presence was comforting, his commitment unshakable. Whether or not they decided to formalize their relationship with marriage remained uncertain, but everyone could see the quiet bond forming between them. It was a bond built on mutual respect, shared grief, and the desire to protect the life Michael had left behind. In a broader sense, Michael's death had a ripple effect throughout Port Charles. People who had once taken tomorrow for granted began to reassess their own lives and priorities, recognizing how fleeting and fragile life could be. Those who knew Michael remembered him as someone who had strived to do the right thing, who had battled adversity time and time again, who had fought to protect those he loved. The tragedy of his passing became a cautionary tale about the unpredictability of fate. Old feuds seemed less important, grudges lost their sting, and many found themselves longing to extend kindness or forgiveness in memory of Michael's compassionate spirit. Still, Carly's grief stood out above all else, a near-palpable entity that cast a shadow over her every interaction. She struggled to navigate each day without Michael, yearning for the chance to hold him once again. Brennan, too, felt the gravity of Michael's absence. He recalled how he had rushed to Carly's side in those tense days following Michael's injury and the devastation he had experienced upon learning that the plane had exploded. He thought of all the plans he had carefully arranged, the German clinic that had promised hope, and how in a single moment, it had all been obliterated. Despite Carly's anguish, Brennan was resolute in his devotion. He knew she might never be able to forgive him, might never look at him without remembering how everything had gone horribly wrong, yet he could not shake his love for her. At times, he considered stepping back entirely, letting her grieve without the constant reminder of the circumstances that had led to Michael's final journey. But he found it impossible to leave her entirely. He hoped that, by discovering the truth behind the explosion, he could at least provide some small solace. Even if Carly rejected him forever, at least he could say he had done what he could to honor Michael's memory. While the official investigation proceeded, life in Port Charles pushed forward, though a somber tone lingered. Willow became more involved in community events, channeling her grief into constructive activities aimed at supporting families in crisis. She hoped her efforts might, in some small measure, honor Michael by helping others who faced difficult struggles. Sasha, increasingly reliant on Jason, began to prepare more seriously for the baby's arrival, balancing medical appointments with her attempts to process her deep emotional wounds. Jason's unwavering presence provided the stability she needed, and he quietly explored the idea of marriage, discussing it sparingly with those he trusted. He understood that the most critical goal was to ensure that Sasha felt secure and protected, that his obligation to Michael's memory was more than just words. Though he wasn't certain what shape that commitment might ultimately take, he resolved to stay true to it no matter what. In the midst of these individual battles, the memory of Michael continued to loom large. The funeral had been a time of collective mourning, but the days and weeks that followed required each individual to reconcile with their loss in a personal way. Carly sometimes found momentary escapes in quiet corners of her home, where she would flip through old photographs of Michael. She found pictures of him as a toddler, laughing brightly, of him blowing out birthday candles as a young boy, of him walking at graduation, full of promise for the future. Those images felt like pieces of another life. Her tears became a nightly ritual, one that she could not avoid. She had trouble sleeping, her dreams often overshadowed by the finality of the casket and the memory of the phone call that sealed her nightmare. The only glimmer of peace she found was in the thought that she had done everything a mother could do, and, even if she had known the outcome, she would have tried to save him all the same. Brennan continued his mission with grim determination, though it took a toll on his emotional health. His nights were often sleepless as he reviewed documents, placed phone calls to foreign agencies, and combed through every detail of the plane's manifest. He learned everything he could about the mechanics of that particular jet, about the backgrounds of the crew members, about the flight path, about weather conditions, and about any possible tampering. He spoke to investigators who assured him they were leaving no stone unturned, though the slow pace of the inquiry weighed heavily on him. Each time he reported his findings to Carly, she offered little reaction, her eyes filled with sorrow and disinterest. She would only sometimes say that none of it mattered anymore. But Brennan could not turn back. If he was to find even a shred of redemption, for himself, for the circumstances, for Carly's heartbreak, he had to see it through. Meanwhile, word spread that Jason was looking into whether marrying Sasha might be the best possible route for all involved. A few people who were close to him voiced concerns, wondering if he was acting out of obligation rather than genuine love, but others saw nobility in it. Jason was known for his loyalty and his willingness to protect those who mattered to him. Michael had asked this of him, and Jason had accepted the responsibility without hesitation. The notion that he might provide a full and stable home life for Sasha and the baby was both comforting and bittersweet, a sign that Michael's legacy would endure in some form. Sasha, though still deeply mourning Michael, found herself unexpectedly touched by Jason's willingness to put her and the child's welfare above all else. She knew that no one could truly replace Michael, but she also recognized that Jason's sincerity could offer her baby the closest thing to a father figure. Whether love would eventually flourish between them or whether they would remain companions joined by tragedy was a question neither felt ready to answer. For the time being, they relied on each other, forging a sense of unity grounded in their love for Michael and their desire to protect the life he had helped create. Time continued its slow march, and life in Port Charles settled into a new normal. The rawness of Michael's loss evolved into an ache that never fully disappeared but became a heavy backdrop to everyday existence. Willow, in her regret, strived to become a better person and a gentler presence in the community, holding on to the lessons learned from losing Michael before she could find resolution. Carly, while still blaming Brennan for organizing that fateful flight, began to recognize that her anger was part of a grief she might never fully surmount. She remained guarded around him, unwilling to let down her defenses, but she no longer erupted at the mere sight of him. They occasionally shared civil conversations about the investigation, although every interaction carried the undercurrent of heartbreak. In the rare moments they found themselves alone, Brennan would quietly ask Carly how she was coping. Carly, who often felt the tidal wave of sorrow threaten to drown her, might give a terse reply. Yet, as time went on, there were instances when a tearful Carly let slip a hint of gratitude for his continuing efforts to seek the truth. Despite the rift between them, Carly could not overlook the lengths Brennan had gone to, first in trying to save Michael, and now in trying to uncover why the plane exploded. Even so, her love for her son dwarfed any sympathy she might feel for Brennan, and she could not open her heart to him the way he hoped she would. More distant acquaintances in Port Charles speculated about the possibility of sabotage. Sonny, known to have many enemies, was rumored to be investigating behind the scenes, furious that an explosion intended to harm him might have cost Michael his life. While Brennan and the official investigation scoured aviation logs and mechanical reports, another angle suggested that the explosion might have had a more sinister origin. Yet such speculation remained unconfirmed, and Carly, while aware of the rumors, could scarcely bring herself to delve into them. All she knew was that her son had been sent away on a plane to receive life-saving treatment, and instead, he had perished. Even amid this swirl of questions, there were moments of unity within the community, gestures of kindness and support that reminded everyone of Michael's own generosity. People organized memorial fundraisers, shared stories of Michael's good deeds, and lit candles in his memory. They set up a scholarship fund in his name, hoping to ensure that his spirit of compassion would live on through the education of others. Carly attended some of these gatherings, quietly watching from the fringes, tears in her eyes, reflecting on the fact that her son had left a legacy in the hearts of so many people. It was a small comfort, one that did not ease her grief but at least reaffirmed that Michael's life had meant something beyond the immediate circle of his family and friends. As Jason and Sasha's situation evolved, people noticed that Sasha began to rely on Jason more intimately. He attended all her prenatal visits, helped her prepare the nursery, and talked with her at length about the future. Their interactions, once tinged with the painful memory of Michael, became calmer, and his sense of familiarity began to grow. The entire matter of marriage was not resolved openly, but the possibility lingered, an unspoken promise that could one day become a reality. Jason, consistent in his commitments, showed unwavering support for Sasha in any way he could. She, in turn, grew closer to him out of a mix of gratitude, dependence, and a hope that her child would never feel the absence of a paternal figure. She admitted to a close friend that she felt guilty having any kind of bond with another man so soon, but she also realized that Michael would have wanted his child cared for with unwavering devotion. Weeks became months, and the memory of the funeral, though still vivid, began to meld into the collective consciousness of Port Charles. The day itself remained etched in the minds of those who loved Michael. They remembered the hush of the crowd, the muffled sobs of family members, the stoic tears in Jason's eyes, the regret on Willow's face, and the heartbreak that caused Carly to tremble at the coffin. It was a day that changed everyone, forcing them to confront their own mortality and the tenuousness of life. Even so, the demands of everyday life inevitably crept back in. Businesses needed running, children needed caring for, and relationships needed tending. The sorrow was woven into the new normal, but people learned to carry on. In the quiet moments, Carly often dwelled on the what-ifs. She played out different scenarios in her mind, imagining outcomes where Michael had stayed in Port Charles, or where she had insisted on a different facility in another city, or where the plane had never taken off at all. Each scenario ended with the dream of a living, breathing Michael, continuing forward into a future she believed he deserved. She also thought about the grandchildren he might have given her and about the illusions of safety she had once harbored. Sometimes, in the dark hours of the night, she wondered if she should have recognized a hidden danger, if she should have asked for more details about the plane or demanded a different mode of transportation. These thoughts haunted her like unrelenting ghosts, stealing her rest and forcing her to confront a reality in which she had no control. Brennan's investigations eventually led him to certain findings, scraps of evidence that either refuted or confirmed certain theories. He learned that the engines had been in working order prior to takeoff, that the crew was fully certified, and that the flight path itself was standard. He also uncovered records of a possible threat, though it was too vague to directly link it to the explosion. In time, a preliminary report from the aviation authorities suggested a technical malfunction, but they could not be certain if it was accidental or the result of tampering. Brennan presented these findings to Carly, but she absorbed them in silence, tears forming as she stared at the documents. She told him, in a voice filled with sorrow, that it did not change her reality. Michael was gone, and no explanation or blame could bring him back. In the midst of this ongoing pain, Willow confronted her remorse in practical ways. She visited Michael's grave, leaving flowers and speaking softly to him, hoping that, wherever he was, he understood that she was sorry. Her gestures, though private and personal, offered her some measure of solace. She realized that life was too short to hold on to bitterness and that sometimes the only way to find peace was to let go of grudges. Willow began volunteering for support groups, speaking to individuals and families who had also suffered unexpected losses or custody battles. Her painful experience with Michael taught her to have empathy for others in difficult circumstances, and she discovered a sense of purpose in guiding them toward resolution before it was too late. Meanwhile, Jason's bond with Sasha solidified. He kept his personal life very private, even under normal circumstances, so few truly knew whether they had made any official plans for marriage. Yet, their closeness was evident to anyone who saw them together. Jason made sure Sasha's checkups ran smoothly, he talked quietly to her about baby names, and he even helped her renovate a small nursery. Whenever Carly saw Jason comforting Sasha, she was reminded of the promise Michael had extracted from him. Carly felt a complex mix of gratitude and sadness. She was grateful that Sasha would not be alone, that Michael's child would have someone to act as a father figure, yet it pained her that it was not Michael himself. Still, Carly knew that Jason was doing exactly what Michael would have wanted. Through all of this, the memory of the catastrophic explosion never faded. The phone call that alerted Brennan to the plane's fate, the broadcast of the tragedy on the news, the horrifying details of no survivors, those images were etched into the collective memory of everyone who cared about Michael. Although time, as it inevitably does, softened the sharp edges of the pain, it left behind a dull ache in place of that initial stabbing grief. People in Port Charles continued to speak Michael's name in hushed tones, as though to acknowledge him and honor his memory without tearing open the wounds of loss too forcefully. For some, the greatest question still remaining was whether there had been more than a malfunction at play. Sonny, as well as other members of the community, suspected foul play. Yet, without conclusive proof, most were left to let the official findings stand. Brennan, though he had given Carly everything he could from his own investigation, still felt something wasn't entirely right. He spent many nights awake, combing through additional details he had overlooked in the hope of finding a single clue that might provide a definitive answer. His motivation was fueled by a lingering hope that by solving this mystery, he might somehow offer a piece of closure to Carly. In truth, he knew it could never undo the tragedy. But closure, even if elusive, was all he had left to give. As for Carly, her journey toward acceptance of Michael's death was gradual. She did not suddenly awaken one day without pain. Instead, she learned to carry her sorrow differently, to bear the memory of Michael in a way that allowed her to function rather than break down. She leaned on friends and family, occasionally even allowing Brennan to see flashes of her vulnerability, though she kept him at arm's length. She recognized his love and sincerity but could not silence the voice in her head that blamed him for the way things had ended. Brennan, in turn, never stopped caring for her. He did all he could to respect her need for space while still offering his unwavering support. Amid these currents of grief, Jason and Sasha's path continued to unfold quietly. The baby's impending arrival became a focal point of hope, a precious symbol of life carrying on even as they mourned. Jason supported Sasha through her medical examinations, offering a steady hand to hold when anxiety threatened to overwhelm her. They did not rush into any formal decisions about marriage, but their bond spoke volumes. Perhaps one day, after they had processed their grief and found a place for Michael's memory in their hearts, they would stand together before loved ones and declare their union for the sake of the child. Or perhaps they would choose another path entirely, living side by side without formalities yet bound by responsibility, compassion, and mutual respect. Whichever course they took, it would be a testament to Michael's lasting influence and the promise Jason had made to him. Thus, life went on in Port Charles, shadowed by sadness yet illuminated here and there by flickers of resilience and compassion. Michael's funeral remained a defining moment, one that people revisited in their minds whenever they felt the sting of his absence. Each day brought incremental changes to the emotional landscape of Carly, Brennan, Willow, Jason, Sasha, and everyone else whose lives Michael had touched. Some found healing through acts of service, others through quiet reflection, and still others through a relentless pursuit of the truth. In each case, Michael's memory guided them, in grief, in regret, in determination, and in hope. A single tragedy had irrevocably altered their paths, but even in his absence, Michael continued to shape their stories, reminding them of the fragility of life, the power of love, and the enduring bonds that define family. Welcome back to my channel, and thank you for joining me as we delved into this profound and heartbreaking storyline in ABC General Hospital. Even though our exploration of these events is heavy with sorrow, we are reminded of the potential for unity and healing that can emerge in the face of tremendous loss. As we watch Carly grapple with grief, witness Brennan's search for answers, observe Willow's journey toward remorse and understanding, and see Jason and Sasha find solace in each other for the sake of Michael's unborn child, we realize that the human spirit endures through even the darkest moments. In a world where tragedy can strike without warning, we cling to the compassion, loyalty, and resilience that bind us all. Though we have learned of an unspeakable loss, we also see the spark of hope in each character's determination to honor Michael's memory. Thank you for being here today, and please stay tuned for further discussions and reflections as we continue to follow the emotional arcs and interconnected destinies of our favorite characters in ABC General Hospital. May we always hold on to hope, even when faced with unspeakable tragedy, and may Michael's memory remind us all to cherish the time we have with those we love.